Yo, it's a fairy. Have you ever thought about if you could just sit around with Dr. Ed Ashby and ask him questions? Well, Ryan and Chris, who were the winners of the raffle for the donations to the Ashby Foundation, these guys right here, they're going to be in a video upcoming. They were the winners, and they got to sit around and talk to the man himself. So this is a relatively long video. We discuss flying planes underwater, shooting 2 rhinos, how the Natal Study came about and its impact on bow hunting the African continent, forward to center, when does 650 grains matter, broadheads, edge bevels, all kind of good stuff. This is worth a listen, and you need to pay attention. There's a lot to chew here. Stay tuned. You are live.
I am live.
I'm not in the whole.
So let's hear the rhino story.
All right. The way I got involved in the Natal Study, God had to step in. I had written to South Africa to ask them, could I hunt a rhino with bow and arrow? And they said, no, archery hunting is not legal in South Africa. And I forgot all about it. And 5 years later, the Natal Parks Board decided they wanted to look at bow hunting as a possibility, just to increase the economics of hunting in South Africa.
Where could you hunt in Africa at that time?
Only in countries that had no regulation. Every country in Africa where bow hunting was mentioned at all in the game laws was to prohibit it. There was no affirmative bow hunting law said you could bow hunt anywhere in Africa.
And you and I have talked. I think you said there was three countries that had that didn't address it. They let you go.
Yep, you could hunt in Mozambique and Kenya until it closed up, and Tanganyika. So you could hunt in those countries.
And that's just because
That's because it was silent. No ways and
They
means.
have a law against it.
Right.
Yeah. So other than that, you couldn't bow hunt at all. But anyway, they decided, okay, we're gonna look at bow hunting and see how viable it is. And they were having their meeting, planning all this stuff. And one of the questions that came up is, could you shoot the big animals? How successful would that be for bow hunters? And one of the guys, and I think it was Spud Ludingham, but I'm not sure. They never told me who it was. But one of the guys there said, somebody wrote us years ago wanting to hunt a rhino. He said, I think I might have his letter. And he went and looked and found my letter. And they called me and said, are you still interested in coming to Africa to shoot a rhino? Well, I didn't have to think very long before giving them an answer. Mm-hmm. And that I've only paid for a safari twice. All my other hunting's been free in Africa because I moved over there and lived there. But I wasn't living there at that time. I was still working for the government. And so I went over there to do this rhino hunt. And we were, the hunt, Spud came up to watch the hunt, and Chris Freeman, two of the senior game rangers. And Spud was head of Natal Parks Board. And they followed me, they literally guided me on the hunt, essentially. And that rhino I got to 18 yards on. The big bull, quite big. Easily the world's record, but I'm anti-record book, so I never put him in there. I got up to 18 yards and put the first arrow in. And the penetration wasn't great, but it looked like, at the time looking at it, might be into the second lung, possibly. And it ran a long way, high blood volume. Takes a long time to bleed out. I don't know the exact distance, but it was a long falling up job. And it was dead on his feet, but we didn't know it. And I got into 10 yards and shot it, second shot. And it took one step and went down. And but the whole time I was over there, they were telling me about what they were trying to do. And after they saw that and realized that, okay, I'm a legitimate bow hunter, they said, would you like to come back next year? We're going to, we'd like to repeat another rhino. And then we're going to Makuzi Park for a month, for 30 days. And we're going to do a cull before the rifle cull, because you got a limited space for animals. They have to take a huge volume off every year. And said, one of the things we want to look at is various equipment. Now I'm covering I wasn't paid for any of this. I was covering my own expenses, and I had to cover it for the second hunt too. And so I bought arrow setups and different broadheads, and I had, I think, 34 or 32 different broadheads that I took over, and several different arrow setups, different weights, all tuned, ready to go. And we went back over there, and first to repeat the rhino, and I guess I'll put that story in right here. We would go out in the morning, and everywhere we saw a rhino track crossing, they would drop off one of the trackers to go look at the rhino, because they wanted to shoot designated rhino. Ones that were old bulls beyond their breeding age, still holding a territory, so the young bulls couldn't get a territory and breed, so the herd wasn't going to grow until somebody removed them. And we had dropped off all the trackers. Well, there was a rhino that we had seen 2 or 3 times before down in this valley, and it was just Chris Freeman and I left. And we saw it down in the valley. And every time we had seen this rhino and tried to stalk him, he had gone out of this valley the same way up through this cut we could see between 2 mountains, 2 hills. And Chris said, okay, I'm gonna give you about 45 minutes or so. He said, you get up in that cut, find you a place up there. And said, I'm gonna stalk you, just like we've been doing. And he's probably going out the same way. See if you can get a shot. Well, I started up this ravine, and I'm going up and just getting narrower and narrower and narrower and steeper and steeper. And I got up to where it topped out into a flat open plain, and it's about the width between these, from side to side, and the banks are like this. And there's a trail on the bottom, and there's a trail 3 feet high on this side of the, where, and I looked, okay, tracks are in the bottom. So, real small. I stand on the upper trail, and I wait, and pretty soon I hear rocks rolling. I'm all set, and I'm waiting. I got Delilah in my big heavy air, and I'm set. And I cut my eyes around. That damn rhino's on the upper trail, about 20, 25 yards away. And I thought, what do I do? How am I going to get away from this thing? And it took a couple more steps and went down on the bottom trail. And it came by me to your knee. And I shot him. That's all I was concentrated on the whole time, was making the shot. And he didn't know what happened. There was this light blow on him. He ran straight out into the flat, made a couple of circles, took off. And we measured, it was, from my tracks to his on a diagonal was 7 feet. And that's the only animal I ever shot that after the shot I shook like a leaf. Because it dawned on me after it was over, that was stupid. All he had to do was turn his head and he had me.
7 feet's a little too close for an animal that size.
Yeah, for that size, you know. He's a 6,000 pound animal. You know, they're double the size of a black rhino. And Chris was down there with his 458, somewhere back in the valley. Damn, that was stupid. But anyhow, we got the second rhino. And so I left that night going to Macousy to hunt with Tony Tompkinson, who was the chief game ranger at Macousy. And they wanted us shooting the animals. They wanted me to take shots, any shot I thought I could make from any angle. Don't wait for a perfect shot. We want to see how the arrow systems perform when it doesn't hit where you intended. You know, when the animals turn, animals move, you know. But because Tony had experimented some with bow hunting there in Macousy and doing some of the initial research. So he knew that, hey, and he shot a compound, Martin water hog, 85 pound. And so even with that setup, shooting that fast, he knew that, you know, you're going to have these bad shots. So I did, but we were back with a rifle if we needed it. So anytime we thought the shot was not lethal or potentially not lethal, the shooter would put it down with a rifle with a remote from where the arrow had hit. Usually head, neck shot, or mostly neck shots. So we didn't lose any of the animals we shot. They were all put down one way or the other. Then we would do a field dissection and look at the performance of that arrow and that setup and record all the data off of it. And that's where I started building my database. And I was collecting a huge amount of information, about 118 points. I don't think I ever added anything to the database after that, off of each shot. So we're tracking a lot of things. If we could not determine on a field autopsy the lethality of the shot, they had veterinarians on staff, 2 of them. And so they would take the animal back to the veterinarians. They would dissect it and tell you exactly, this would have been lethal, this wouldn't have. Here's what was hit. You know, it took all guesswork out of it. And when it was over, we started looking at the information. And the information that came out of it, the one thing that came out of it that absolutely amazes me looking backwards is, and I made that statement in the write-up, that when a heavy bone was hit, it appeared that 650 grains was the minimum arrow mass to break heavy bone. And in years, 26 years of testing afterwards, a lot of it intensely focused solely on heavy bone threshold, a focal study. That's 650 grain, give or take a little bit, right around 650, depending on the arrow setup, is what it takes to break heavy bones. And that doesn't appear to have changed in what we got so far. Using any compounds, it doesn't matter what it is. FOC has no effect on that. But in the 30 days, I shot 154 animals. And people always say, well, you did all your testing on buffalo. No. We started out we were shooting warthogs, impalas, inyalas, zebra, kudu, all sorts of, we didn't shoot an eland on that one.
For the audience's sake, what's a heavy bone? Just for the
Oh,
audience's sake.
I shot that with lady.
No, what would you define as a heavy bone?
A heavy bone?
Oh, a heavy bone.
Yeah. Just for the audience's sake.
Yeah, we're looking at humerus, femur, pelvic girdle, on the bigger animals' spine. As you get into the bigger ones, those are bigger animals' scapular ridge gets to be a heavy bone, and even down on the head of the scapula.
Was
on a
the
big animal.
Was the combination of the scapula laying on top of the spine something that was like really difficult? I've always thought that it was
not particularly. The era setups that literally tore through the scapula, take the scapula flat because that's kind of where the spine is, would penetrate deep enough in there. And what became my benchmark broadhead back then, the grizzly, turned out to be the best performing head, followed by a head called a maxi head that's no longer made. And then in a wide cut, the Ben Pearson deadhead. Those were the three best heads out of the whatever we had, 32 or 42. I don't remember the number. I'd have to look at the data. That's 50, 60 years ago. And it's hard to recall that stuff back that far. But anyway, we put all that. Now, they were looking at a lot of other things. They had people looking at the stress factor on the animals that were shot, the stress factor that was involved with the animals accompanying the animals we shot, time to collapse, distance traveled to collapse, all sorts of things like that they were tracking. But my part was strictly the broadhead, the terminal ballistics.
Yeah, right.
From impact with the animal till the arrow stopped.
Right.
That's the part I was doing. And I wrote my part and sent it in. They put it all together with their stuff and submitted it to the entire Parks Board. And Natal legalized bow hunting, except for the pachyderms, which I had recommended against, because the equipment, the arrow setups at that point, I didn't think were adequate out of the bows that most people could shoot to be able to take the big animals.
The safety thing.
It's a safety thing. Safety for both the hunter and the professional hunter.
Yeah.
And
because you're stupid and shot a rhino at 7 feet.
Right. And people ask me, how did you get to do that? Well, I was the only person dumb enough to do it.
Yeah, right.
It's literally. But once they legalized bow hunting in Natal, first affirmative bow hunting law in all of Africa, within a year, Zimbabwe and Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia all legalized bow hunting. Now, Mozambique, to this day, still has no ways and means. And you can go spear hunting for them. Yeah. I think old Tim Wells did in Mozambique. So, and it's spread all over Africa now. All of West Africa has legal bow hunting. North Africa, it's legal up in there now.
When did Natal approve it? What year? 70?
No, 1980. The end, either right at the end of 85 or the start of 86.
So then bow hunting's only been
affirmative legal.
Yeah, affirmative
since
legal.
then.
We know people were running around doing it, but
yeah,
since 86.
Yeah,
roughly.
Yeah.
And it's because of the study.
Yeah, because of the Natal study.
And because you shot a rhino first. Why did they chipped you off kind of? They gave you a tall order there. Let's just shoot a rhino first. We're not going to mess around with the impalas and stuff.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Yeah, that's what we started with. First animal was rhino.
Wild. Yeah.
Second time I went back, first animal was rhino. Yeah, if I'm going to die, they want me to die quick.
Yeah, right. They didn't believe you, so they were trying to smash you.
Well, that was literally it. That's the reason they wanted to repeat it. They said, was this a fluke?
Yeah, right. That's fair. That's
Yeah.
a big animal, right?
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about like your arrow setup, and I know you talked about the broadhead and everything, but what?
Well,
what
anyway,
made that
two
setup
different
so efficient?
broadheads I used. The first time around, again, doing it over. Had we done the Macuzzi part first, I would probably have used the grizzly. But because I knew it had taken black rhino before, I used the Howard Hill, which has some real flaws in it. I discovered as we did the later testing at Macuzzi. The time we were through with Macuzzi, I knew, and I had shot Howard Hills for a long time. I discovered that it has flaws, big flaws. But I was fortunate to get through. I didn't hit dead center on the heavy reel. It's the only reason I got the amount of penetration I did. Now, I was shooting a full-length 24-19 with a fiberglass shaft inside it, not carbon, fiberglass shaft inside it, and all the weight I could pack into that air was 1,286 grains. It was not high FOC. I had never tested it. I didn't know anything. Nobody was talking about FOC then as a penetration factor. So it was total unknown quantity. And the second rhino, because the Howard Hill didn't perform like I wanted to, when I did test shots on the first rhino after he was down, for the second time, I took a triangular file, 7 inches long, and turned it down where it would fit in the shaft, and sharpened it as best I could along his, steep angles there. And then I took plyo bond and broke triangles off of single blade razor blades and bonded them to it, and then baked it in the oven to toughen it. And they stayed on through the bone. Worked. And it did well. That head, of course, and I'd changed, of course, I actually ended up with the exact same weight. I stayed 1,286 grams on both of them. But the shaft was much, much shorter because I had a much, much heavier point and would have had high FOC that I didn't know made any difference at all. All I could tell you for sure is that the second arrow sure as well penetrated better than the first one. And
but you couldn't. There was no way to find the forward to center thing until carbon came along.
well, you
You couldn't. Well, you did it, but
Yeah,
you didn't
you
know what did.
Didn't
One of
know
my
he
friends
was
said.
doing
Well, I did it by accident there.
Yeah, he
but
said-
we weren't measuring FOC. Nobody talked about FOC.
Yeah. Right.
You read the Eastern stuff, and they had just what they got now.
Yeah.
That for targets you need 6 to 10%. You use 12 to 15 on hunting arrows.
Mm-hmm.
That was all it was. And based on, I don't think it's based on any kind of results. They just pulled them numbers out of some dark location. And
So that's a question a lot of people have. I would say you discovered forward to center is an aerodynamic.
well, no, there were a
that.
couple of people.
How did you figure it out?
Well, there were a couple of people, traditional archers, that were posting stuff about they were using high forward center, not nearly as high as I went up, but that they were noticing that they got better penetration. And I actually put a post, shows you how wrong you can be when you don't have anything to base it on, and said I didn't think it was going to make much difference, but I would test it. And when I tested it, I discovered that, next to structural integrity and perfect flight, FOC is it, biggest aid in penetration, when all else is equal in the air. And then I got off on this thing of, okay, is there an upper limit? How much is, well, the highest I could get, because we didn't have the components we got today, was 31.6%. And it was amazing. And of course, I was tracking the percentage gain per percentage increase, and it goes up geometrically. So this first increase gives you that much. The next increase gives you that much. The next one gives you that much. And then that much. It builds on each one. And as you start to get to those upper ones, you're looking at like a 10, 11% increase in penetration for a 1% increase in FOC. But you got to get it up in those levels. And once you get there, every fraction of an ounce starts to count when you take it off the rear end of the arrow.
Right.
Loading the front end now makes very little change. But taking it off the back end and lightening up that long rear lever arm makes a huge difference.
I weighed my feathers the other day. All 4 of my feathers are 6 grains.
Yeah.
One vein
Weighs.
is 6 grains.
Yep.
And you get free from the center.
My veins are 6 grains.
All my feather set is 6
I'm
grains.
talking about just one of my veins.
Right.
It's 6
That's
grains.
4 feathers.
I use the TAC driver 275.
Yeah.
They're 6 grains.
And you can, depending on what you're shooting and your shooting style and how good you are with it, like these high FOCs that Rob's building, you can get down to a 2-inch 3-fletch A&A. They look funny.
I've never tried them aside from when I'd shoot like try to recurve.
I shoot the 2-inch A&As on mine at 715 grains, and they're about 28%. And they just
I'm gonna try them.
yeah. But
Well, you do have to tune them. Everybody's going to be different. And the FOC that you've got is going to make a difference, as is the wind shear of the broadhead.
I've got all the stuff at my house to, tune my bow and build arrows and stuff, and I like messing around and seeing what changes.
So one more
It's
question for
fine.
the audience. I already know the answer, but it'd be good to hear you say it.
What?
When does 650 not matter?
Well, when everything goes perfect.
Plan Super A.
The Plan A era is the minimum that will kill on a perfect shot. But how often does everything go perfect?
Right.
Excrement happens.
You've told me. You've told me that it moves.
Yeah,
How much does it move?
a bunch.
In Plan B, it's factor 12.
Oh,
So
if you're building a 12 factor arrow on standard size animals, it brings it to the point that it has now opened up any shot angle. You can go in through the humerus, out through the hip on an elk.
right.
You can shoot just forward of the hip on an eland or a moose and come out the front and have complete pass through.
But that's a 12 factor arrow.
That is a
long
12 factor arrow.
with the right broadhead too.
Well, that's part of the 12 factors.
Yeah, right.
You've got to have that real high 3-to-1 mechanical advantage, which is the highest you can get right now. I took the grizzlies. They were 1 1/8 inch, and I took them down to 1 inch wide and maintained the same taper and called it the modified grizzly. And then I experimented taking them down to, 13/16 I think was the smallest. And it got smaller than that. I could no longer sharpen the edge at 25-degree bevel because I was hitting the ferrule. And so that was as narrow as I could go. And I ended up, the compromise and the broadhead I shot the bulk of my game with was a modified grizzly.
Do you have any at the house?
I probably still have some stuck on arrows.
So I need to go digging through the sea containers.
Yeah, I've given a lot of those away though, so we'll have to look and see what's there. Oh, I probably still have. I got a lot of arrows still.
Yeah.
Odds are there's still at least 1 or 2 in there.
Yeah.
But so many people have wanted, particularly forage woods, because those were my hunting arrows. And so they may be gone, they may not. We'll just have to look and see.
I'll have to come to Rock Springs and dig around.
Yeah. Or I might have some, I've got boxes of stuff that, got broadheads and field points and crap in it.
Well, you already gave me a whole pile of stuff, man.
Well, I've given everybody a whole pile of stuff.
Right.
And all my bows are gone now. And I've given all those away because I couldn't pull with as proud as my hand, I couldn't pull a 15-pound bow. It's my days shooting a bow's over. I did a lot of experimenting with compounds too, and that didn't appeal to me. I'd rather handgun hunt, to tell you the truth, than I had. Because I've done a lot of that too, a lot of rifle gun hunting and stuff. Hunting with a pistol is a good challenge.
What made you get into archery? When did you get into archery and how old was you?
When I was in the 3rd grade, Howard Hill came to my school promoting his movie Timba. It was out in the movie theaters.
What year is that?
What would that have been? 55, 56, I think, 1956.
You were born in 48, 47? What year were you born?
46.
Okay.
Yeah. In January 46. And yeah, it was 3rd grade that he came. And did stuff that they put you in jail for now. He started his show, we were all in the auditorium, seated. He started his show by walking in through the doors at the back, shooting his arrows over everybody's head as a target on as fast as he could shoot them. About a dozen of them, just. And then he went on with the rest of his show.
Yeah, cool principle.
Yeah, oh yeah. And I never, other than one time, I didn't know Howard Hill. But I've hunted with Fred Bear and I've hunted with Ben Pearson.
Elementary school? Where'd you go to elementary school?
Henderson, Texas.
Henderson, all right. Up
Yep.
the East Texas Oilfield.
Yep. But I went home that day, cut down a willow branch, stole some fishing line off Dad's reel, made me a bow, cut some cane, took his tin snips and cut points out of tin can lids, fastened them on there as sewing thread, and went to shoot. Now, my bow lasted, I don't know, 6 or 8 shots before it broke, but I was hooked. That was it. And of course, I was brought up as a rifleman. Dad was a rifle instructor. So he didn't discourage me, but he didn't do a lot to encourage me either. And so and there was, there's no such thing as archery clubs and things like that. And I went to Josh Strickland's sporting goods store and bought my first bows there. And they were all just, they were fiberglass bows and, things like that. And had no idea what I was doing. They were all ambidextrous, chef on both sides. And when I got old enough that I could get employed doing summer jobs and weekend jobs and stuff, digging ditches and putting on tar asphalt roofs and stuff like that was backbreaking. I saved up enough money to buy a good bow. Well, there's no bow shop, so I went back to Josh Strickland's sporting goods store. He pulls out his catalog, Bear Archery catalog, and we're looking. There we go. Okay, I can afford this. And it was a Bear Kodiak. And so I said, I want to order one. And he said, right hand or left hand? I said, huh? And he says, you got to order it right hand or left handed. Well, I was right handed, so I ordered a right hand bow. Got it and discovered all this time I've been shooting left handed.
How heavy was that bow?
Which one?
The first one you ordered.
The first good bow, 42 pounds.
How old were you?
11? Something like that. But I had made the mistake of the second bow that I bought was a Paul Bunyan green fiberglass, 55 pounds. And if I got my jaw set and crossed my eyes and puckered up my rear end, I could pull it for 1 or 2 shots. And then I had to drop back, and the third bow that I got was from Herters. And it was a kind of brown and white striped fiberglass, again, ambidextrous. And that's the bow I really learned to shoot with. And started doing a lot of shooting small game and dragonflies and bumblebees and a lot of bow fishing. And I was bow fishing without fish arrows. We live right there on the lake. I mean, it's 200 yards back of the house. And go down there and a lot of gar. And you get those gar And you try to shoot him when he comes up, muddy water. So you can't see him for just before he rolls. A lot of this really fast shooting at targets. And just shooting with you could buy Ben Pearson, these little target arrows, just with like a bullet point on the front, 25 cents a piece. And that's what I shot fish with. But I wasn't shooting them down in the water. I shoot them just at the top, the road. And then I'd wait till everything settled down, and you wade out there with all the snakes and turtles. And, oh, there he is. Try to recover your fish. A lot of times you couldn't get him, but a lot of times you could. And shot a lot of bullfrogs, and shot one duck that flew away with my arrow. And I decided those bullet points really weren't good for ducks then. And a ton of snakes. That place covered with snakes. East Texas got more snakes than any place in the world I've ever been. And so I got a lot of practice shooting them too. And besides blowing them up with cherry bombs, which was great fun. And, about the time I got that first good bow, Bob Lee, founder of Wing Archery, established the first bow hunting only lease in Texas at Wheelock, right up here at Bryan, College Station. And I got on that lease. And we had 120 families that could bow hunt on there. Now, not everybody in every family bow hunted, but we had a lot of bow hunters. And it was just on 1,800 acres. And not everybody hunted, everybody's there all the time. Although it was really packed opening week usually.
Sure.
Christmas, virtually nobody down there. I always hunted Christmas down there without fail. School break, Christmas, I was going to hunt. And I hunted that first year with that. And hunted there several years until the lease was taken out from under us for people that paid a lot more money than we could pay. And so I had several years there, and gradually I worked my way up. That's where, you didn't have the rivalry between archery companies then that you got now. There were very few archery companies. And Fred Bear came down and hunted, and Ben Pearson came down and hunted on the lease with Bob Lee. And I remember standing out there at noon, roving in the big field there by where the camp house and where the campground and all where everybody camped. Roaming around out there and swapping bows with each other to shoot. And of course, Fred Bear left-handed. So he'd give that Bob Ben, they'd have to shoot left-handed with it. And, but it was nice that they cared about archery and they cooperated. And they didn't have a rivalry with each other. Even though economically they were competitors, archery was just growing. It was just getting started in the country. And I became real good friends with Ben Pearson. When I stayed on his place up in Arkansas. And he gave me great advice. And he's the one that got me over to a heavy limb, slow longbow, because he recognized right away that I had some kind of problem with my release. And it's because of bone structure in my hand that I didn't know I had. That my bones on part of my hand grow too long, and it causes them to curve just like my feet do. It's just, it's not hereditary, it was, I was just born with them that way, so I'm stuck with it. But I didn't know that. But he watched me shoot, and he said, you get a longbow as long as you can get it, so that's going to reduce your string angle. You want real thick, heavy, slow limbs, and you concentrate on following through after you shot. So what's important to you is you don't let your bow hand, your bow arm, move till that arrow hits the target. And he said, it doesn't matter. And I've tried it later on, and he was right. You can take your string out 2 or 3 inches from your face and still hit your target, because those limbs are so heavy and they're so slow, it pulls the string back into the line long before the arrow leaves. It's the most forgiving bow you can shoot. And it has a lot of other hunting advantages that I learned later going through life. And even though I went on to shoot a lot more recurves and compounds, and I went back to the longbow, it's the best hunting weapon for my style of hunting. Hands down, no question about it. I always looked at it that the longbow like that, the hill style longbow, is to bow hunting what a double rifle is to big game hunting, big dangerous game hunting. It is not the most accurate in the world, but it's accurate enough for the job at hand. It's light to handle and fast to handle. Those are things that were important in being able to shoot. It had versatility, because that arrow is sitting just above my hand. It's literally like that. So when I rotate my bow, it's virtually rotating around the axis of the air. So I could tilt that bow any direction I wanted, past horizontal. And I could tilt it back this way. And because your fingers, shooting Mediterranean split finger, is putting tension on the nock of the arrow, it keeps the arrow against the bow. You don't have to hold it. And you can shoot with the bow horizontal back the other direction. So that opens up a versatility when you're a stalking hunter to be able to take shots from all body positions in relation to the game.
Sure.
Without having to turn, move your feet, make all that movement to get in position to shoot. And I could shoot it sitting flat on my butt on the ground, laying on my stomach, laying on my back. I practiced all those shots. I even practiced flipping the bow over and shooting it left-handed with the arrow just right on my hand, right there at the shelf, but still on my hand. And of course, none of those are center shot bows either.
I can't do that with my compound.
No, no. Well, when I was up in Minnesota, all but one of my friends shot compound. And we used to have a shooting game where it was follow me. And whoever had the closest shot got to pick the next shot. And we usually shot for beers or drinks or something like that. And all I had to do was win one shot. And buddy, that game was mine, because I'd pick shots where they couldn't put their bow straight up and down. And that was it. It was over. I win every shot from there on.
Wow.
Great fun. Anything else anybody wants to know about? I can BS all day if you keep asking questions.
What about the
Otherwise,
long
I don't
shot?
remember stories.
You
Where-
said about the
where'd you,
long shot or whatever, or was that the
Well,
7 yard?
have you made your whole life was hunting, or did you ever have a professional job before?
Yeah, I'm an eye doctor by profession.
Okay.
I was in the Air Force for 10 years, essentially 9 years, 8 months, 6 days, or something like that. Then I transferred over to the Commissioned Corps of the Public Health Service, and I worked on the
State of Texas.
No, I worked on the Indian reservations. I started out in Minnesota, working on Red Lake Reservation, and then I moved to the area office where I was responsible for the eye care in a 7-state area, and I still did some clinical work, but mostly administrative work, and there were some real problems in the Indian Health Service, and I was a whistleblower. And after that, which was not a long story in itself, but anyway, I'm one of the few people who's got a nice letter from Congress that says I am an honest gentleman.
Whistleblowers weren't happy.
No, I went through a lot of hell
Yeah,
before they relented, and they said, oh, once official reports are in your record, they can't be removed. Bullshit. They sent me to Washington to stand there and watch them pull them out and replace them under order of Congress. But then they gave me, options of where to go. Well, they were just opening up a position with the Bureau of Prisons for the Chief of Eye Care for the nation. So I took that position, and I spent my last 4 years working for the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And
What state were you living in?
well, my home base was at Butner, North Carolina,
Okay.
but I traveled to places all around.
Did you have a family?
Part of the time, no kids, but was married twice. Yeah, which proves it takes a while to learn. But I can be taught if you hit me enough times.
So when did you go? When did you start really just being a hunter? How old were you?
Oh, I grew up a hunter. Dad started me shooting competition rifle at age 4.
Okay.
Shot my first rifle match at age 5.
Okay.
And I have still got the 22 that I learned to hunt on, and started my target career with. It's a Remington 521T, and Dad would give me a 122 shell, and if I could bring something back, kill something, I could have another one, and I could do that all day long. First time I missed, it's through for today. You can go again tomorrow, but for today you're done. You missed.
What did your dad do for a living?
Ran a motel.
Henderson, Texas.
Yep. And it was good. The things you could do as a kid then, and the things parents did, they'd lock you up for now. That'd be child neglect.
Yeah, right.
When did you go? When did you hunted all the time? But when did you first fall in love with Africa? It sounds like that was your.
I went. First hunt was 75 in Rhodesia, and like a lot of people that go, I thought this is expensive. Damn cheap by today's standards. Thought this is expensive. This will be my one and only trip. Well, before I was even close to finishing my safari, I was trying to figure out how I could get back. But fortunately, the professional hunter that I had then was Gordon Cormack. We became tremendous friends. And I went back to numerous trips to Africa, hunting with people I knew, people he knew, for free. Not paying anything for the hunting. And but not getting any trophies to bring back out of it either, but still getting to hunt. And I knew shortly after that it was only till I could economically afford to retire. When my retirement was big enough I could live comfortably on it. That was it. I was going to quit. And I did. I quit. I liquidated everything I owned in North America, except my library, which I did store with a friend, and moved to Africa. Bought me a place there.
What year?
That was started in 1994.
Okay.
And
So how long were you in Africa before?
I was kicked out in 2001, towards the end of the year. Don't remember the exact month now.
You made 7 years in Africa.
Just 7 years there. 7 years is my thing. I was stationed with the Air Force 7 years in Alaska. Then I was in Africa 7 years.
Did you do a lot of hunting in Alaska?
Oh yeah.
What did you kill with your bow in Alaska?
I took most of the big stuff. Even then you had to have a permit for muskox. So I didn't get muskox, didn't get walrus, but I got most of the other stuff.
You got the grizzly?
I got grizzly and brown bear and black bear up there, my first black bear.
Got the caribou?
Got caribou, Dall sheep, goat, wolf, moose.
Where were you stationed in Alaska?
At Isleson, Fairbanks. Yep.
How many animals would you say that you've killed?
Total now?
Yeah.
Probably, and now I'm just having to estimate because up till I started the study, well, actually before that, 1982, I started keeping records. So the first 25 years I hunted, I got no records.
What about just like large game and stuff? Do you have a rough idea?
Rough idea is very close to 2,000.
Most of those are with like a longbow.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And in those later years, I've got 627 kills and 4 failures to recover.
What's that?
Out of 631 animals total, I had 4 non-recoveries.
Wow.
Across
600.
out of 631 total. There's 627 recovered, 4 not recovered, and 2 of the non-recovered were pigs that I shot about 8 seconds apart, and I could see them on the mud flat dead, but I could not recover. One was a mule deer in Colorado, and I waited, followed the blood trail, went down the mountain. At the Jeep Road, it ended in a gut pile, tire tracks, human tracks. Deer gone.
Somebody found it before you.
Just someone picked it up before I got down there. Yep.
So that doesn't count.
And I lost a bear in Minnesota that when I shot it, I was right on the edge of the swamp, way back in. I had some Rokons. It's 2-wheel motorbikes, you know what they are, with tires that look like tractor tires. And you can get way back in because the whole thing would float. But I couldn't get all the way back in there. I could get within about a mile of where it was. And I'd walk back in there, and it's one of them bears' nests. And there were several decent sized bears that looked like coming to the bait. And I shot that bear, and the first leap he made was in the swamp water. And it's cold weather too, it's fall. I waded out as far as I could go in that swamp. And that was it. There was little tufts of, little hummocks of bushes and stuff all out through there.
Yeah.
But it was deep water. And it's so far back in, I had no way to get a canoe or kayak or anything back in there.
So
Wasn't by myself.
I'm assuming out of 631 animals, large game animals that you've shot, right? Probably a fair amount of those are deer, elk.
There's North American stuff, deer, elk, moose.
On the West Coast?
And not a whole lot west coast of, you know, if you want to count Alaska
Right.
and you know, southeast Alaska
West
and the
Coast,
islands.
It's all the same terrain and stuff we got
Yeah.
from Washington.
I did a lot of hunting of blacktails and stuff out of Montague and the ABCs, stuff like that.
Using a bow that probably shot what, like 150 feet per second?
No, depending on the arrow setup I was shooting, you know, I could get close to 160.
160.
Yeah. That's about it. And that was adequate.
But
what I
using good heavy 12 factor arrows.
Well, no, they weren't. The 12 factors, it took me all those 26 years of research and all of these on we're doing the setup shots. So we got about 5,000 shots to draw information from.
Oh, I see.
And I've got beyond the 5,000, I've got all those focus studies. Well, there's probably 1,000 shots in just testing heavy bone threshold. Looking at nothing but that.
Sure.
Arrows of different setups. But from that, I developed these factors based on their percentage influence on the outcome penetration. You know, and the early legends of archery all knew that penetration was it. Because Fred Bear's got a statement he made in like 1942 or 3 in Ye Sylvan Archer, where he said, any arrow will kill a deer on a well-placed shot, but what you need is an arrow that will crash through when the going gets rough. And in Hunting the Hard Way, Howard Hill said, all else equal, penetration is the name of the game.
Yeah.
And it is. If you don't reach the vitals, it doesn't matter.
That's what
What
kills
kind of
animal.
cut width you've got, it doesn't matter anything. You've got to have the penetration. And it's got to be something that's still sharp when it reaches those vitals, regardless of what it's gone through to get there. Mud, hide, you know, 2.5 feet of gut. You know, you've got to have that penetration. And there's no question, structural integrity, the most important thing. Even back in the Natal Study, yet people always say the major reason I recovered animals arrow wasn't well placed. We didn't find that because we were putting down with rifles the shots that didn't look lethal.
Right.
The number one failure is lack of adequate penetration. And structural integrity was the number one failure in getting adequate penetration. And perfect flight is what, and that comes in the later study. You've got to have that. It's the facilitator for your other factors to work. You've got to have that arrow flying straight, and you want it flying straight as quickly as you can get it, because that conserves arrow energy. Even with a high performance bow, you're dealing with less energy than a 22 long rifle. And when you start shooting big animals with a 22 long rifle, you need to do everything you can to maximize the penetration you're going to get. And that's what it's about with the arrow, is conserving the arrow force and using it as much as possible to achieve penetration. So the perfect flight gets you out of paradox as fast as possible. And it also gives you a straight line force when it hits. Now, you get a paradox of the arrow, or as I call impact paradox, when it hits, because the broadhead is now stopped. And the arrow is going to bend like in an S curve. You got to see it in slow motion to understand how much they bend. It is dramatic.
Yeah, I've seen some videos.
Yep. And you can mitigate a great amount of that with a high FOC. And the high FOC also has the advantage of your long rear lever arm is now lighter mass. So it stops its oscillations much quicker. It doesn't have the mass to keep going thunk, 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 or whatever direction it's oscillating in. Well, you want it to stop as quick in the penetration as possible, because if it's still in this impact paradox, as it starts going through tissue, that shaft is having to push the tissue back and forth and back and forth. And that's bleeding off arrow force at an incredible rate. So, that's another big advantage that you pick up out of the FOC. You also get the real short forward lever arm, which is now stiff. The analogy is get you a 1/4 inch dowel rod or an 1/8 inch or 3/8, whatever you want to use. Hold it to the end and push it against that beam. And you touch it back here and almost no force at all on bow it. Mm-hmm. Shorten it up, takes more force to bow it. You get right up here and try to push it, and it doesn't bow at all. So having that short forward lever arm, it gives you the rigidity to get through skin, hide, bone, and so forth with the front of the arrow. And the light shaft is now not having, to push the tissues as much, because it's going to come out of paradox very quick. We're conserving the arrow force. Then, next factor down, you look at mechanical advantage of the broadhead. Because a 3-to-1 mechanical advantage is basically taking the force of the arrow and tripling it. It's going to do 3 times as much work as you could with a 1-to-1 mechanicals, 1 inch wide, 1 inch long. And a lot of broadheads now, particularly most of the mechanicals, are way less than 1 mechanical advantage. You're actually sucking the energy out of your arrow, besides the energy takes up to deploy the blades and the amount of resistance. Most of those have conical points and chisel points and stuff like that, which you can take one of those and get a hide and try to push it through.
Yeah, Rob was telling us about that last night.
see the force.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
never even thought about
yep.
that.
And then you get a 20 or 25 degree single bevel, very thin, and get it really sharp, and you can just barely touch that hide with almost no force at all, conserving arrow force. And so it goes, each factor down the line has contributed something, but not as much as those big four up front. Structural integrity, perfect arrow flight, FOC, and mechanical advantage of the broadhead. Those are the four absolute crucial ones. But to get everything you can out of your arrow, which becomes really important if you shoot a light bow or you hunt the bigger animals, you want to add as many factors on as you can. Way down at the bottom, and people make a big deal. You know, Ashby says you've got to shoot a 650 grain arrow to kill deer. No, never said that, never will.
That's your heavy bone threshold.
That's heavy bone threshold. And all that means is when you hit the heavy bone threshold, with impact on a heavy bone, the frequency of penetrating the bone will increase right around 650 grains. It's a big jump. You know, now if you've got a poor bone performance broadhead, it may penetrate a heavy bone 8% of the time. And you go up to 650 or above, and all of a sudden it jumps to 12. You know, it's a 50% increase in penetrating. You take something, you know, like the tough head, the original tough head, true 3-to-1, high mechanical advantage, and if you're, you know, below threshold, but still you got to have decent mass. And say you're shooting upper 500s, heavy bone, you've got better than a 50% chance that you're still going to break it. But when you get up to that 650, that jumps to 100%. It's a big jump.
Yeah. Well,
Now that's on standard size big game, and I'm talking about up to moose size, the standard.
most of the stuff we find here in the
Yeah,
States.
if you start looking at Cape Buffalo, you know, with a 5-inch ball joint,
It's going to take more.
it takes more. But for any of your standard game, that 600 grain or 650 grain threshold is really important. And in the last year I was able to test, the year I hurt my back, I did quite a lot of testing looking at FOC and mechanical advantage, revisiting, and focused on FOC's effect on the heavy bone threshold, and it's none. I built up arrows that were 630 grains that were 30% FOC, 3-to-1 mechanical advantage, everything, and they had a 50% reaching rate on buffalo, on heavy bone, not the ball joint though. Because till Rob shot that buffalo, I didn't know that for sure that you could break a ball joint on Cape Buffalo with an arrow. I'd never tested it. But when I took that same arrow setup and went to 655 grains, we're talking about a very slight change in weight.
Yeah, 25 grains.
It went to 100%.
It's crazy. So I know
It makes a huge difference. And you know, and it wasn't just once. I did it with different arrow setups. And every one of them, same thing. Very close, you know, shooting 25, 30 grain, matched arrows. Just the weight distribution different. Both of them tuned. And looked at every one of them. And you have, no, it won't go through the heavy bone. Depending on the broadhead, 30, 40%, 50%. And you go up above that threshold, 100%, 100%, 100%, 100%. And that was the same year I did all the testing on buffalo with the 40-pound Bear Formula Silver recurve target bow. And I had arrows that were 25, 26% FOC, mid 700 grain weight, shooting against matched arrows that were normal FOC. And the lower ones I don't remember the exact average penetration, but it was less than a double lung hit. Where the ones that were, all these are above heavy bone threshold, but the ones that were at the higher FOC all went to the opposite side of the chest wall. And so right then I knew that, yes, right arrow. Now this is taking a well-placed shot, essentially broadside through the ribs. And that's still close to an inch of bone through the rib. A slow 40-pound bow will kill buffalo with the right arrow setup. And that's why we had confidence when Rob was building up those arrows for that lady that was shooting a 48-pound recurve. And she made her trip to Africa. One arrow on a Cape buffalo, one arrow on a giraffe. 48-pound recurve.
That's really kind of saying something.
It is.
It's saying a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand the weight of just that, because everybody's like, oh, it's nice for the guys that have like those 30+ inch, draw lengths.
Oh yeah, that long
like
power
that.
stroke.
It's free energy, but you've got somebody that's like
Yeah.
low.
I don't ask
low
Rob.
poundage bow and
Her arrows were 25, 26, something like that. Of course, I only draw 27.5 on a long bow, on a hill style bow. That flat grip and the fact that you shoot relaxed arm. You don't try to straighten your arm. Shoot a bent arm. And that also is for movement, because when you shoot around this way, your draw length would lengthen.
yeah,
A little more bend on your arm. You shoot this way, it
shorter.
shortens it. So if you're used to shooting with bent arm, you can push your arm out. You end up with your same draw length.
Let me ask you something here. So I know, like where would you consider your level of skill to be as like an archer?
I joke about it a lot. I was never great, but I could stay at 20 yards. I could stay inside a 3-inch circle.
So,
And that's shooting from various positions. Every shot,
right,
different.
you being the kind of guy that's shot close to 2,000 animals and not being like the world's most premier, elite, accurate archer, what do you attribute your success with big game hunting?
Well, some of it, as I concentrate on learning a lot of hunting skills to get me close. I came up with this philosophy of close enough to kill. You determine where you can shoot close enough to kill. Your group size, and that gives you your distance. Then you develop your hunting skills to get you close enough to the animal to kill. So the whole philosophy is close enough to kill. You don't have to be a perfect shot. All you got to do is put it in the boiler room.
yeah,
You don't have to hit a quarter. The animal's going to be moving anyway. It's going to be good for you sometimes. It's not going to be good for you sometimes. But if you can stay in that kill zone and then learn to get your fat ass close enough to the animal that you're in your kill zone, you're close enough to kill.
what would you say your average distance for like your shot taken on large game
Well,
would be? Give us a range.
Those last
We
kills.
already know your rhino was 7 feet.
Yeah. Across those 627 kills, when I averaged out, the longest shot was at 42 yards. And the average was 15.97 yards. And probably
And you get this number from the data in your
from the
report.
from the database. And that's all kept in a separate database. Hunted animals, test shots. So an entirely different database. And I looked at it from the standpoint, the reason I started developing it was in my real hunting situations, am I seeing the results that the test shots predict.
Yeah, right.
And in actuality, it's slightly better than would be predicted by the test shots. And to me, that's great validity for the test shots.
Absolutely.
And so, you've got to correlate all these things. And data is the only way you can do it. And the only data that's valid is to get up there in the real world. It's of course been in the Air Force as long as I was. Planes and stuff come to mind. But, you take Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works, probably the finest engineers in the world in aeronautics. And they have every facility possible, all the computer modeling, access to high-speed cryo computers. They've got wind tunnels, they've got everything. And they design these planes and they do all of this testing. But at the end, they got to put a man in it and put it in the air to test it in a real environment. And I've got to, I don't want to tip my hand because it's coming up in one of my ramblings on the newsletter. But I wrote NASA, and I asked them, with the cost of doing all the test flights they do, and considering the engineering that they have and so forth, why is it worthwhile to spend all these tax dollars doing these flights?
I look forward to
it is the real world testing, but they go into a little detail about it, and it's essentially the same thing until you fly it in the real world. And I make the analogy of these foam shooters. It's like taking your airplane and test flying it in the ocean. It don't fly well in the ocean, but you put it in the air, it flies a whole lot better. But still, virtually every airplane that's been built, they've made modifications to it after they put manned flight.
Or it's like trying to put a submarine in the air. There's
same thing.
The right tool for the right job. Right?
Yeah.
So
Testing tanks underwater, same difference.
Some people might choose a screwdriver to drive a nail. I've seen it happen myself, but a hammer's a whole lot better.
Yeah. I've seen them drive a lot of screws that way.
Yeah, you wouldn't use a hammer to drive a screw.
Yeah. That's real common in Africa.
Thank you, Ed.
Oh, most welcome.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
Yes, thank you.